Thank you for joining and welcome to the third edition of the Workforce Futurist series. One of the things that we recognize and we keep hearing from so many people is we are in the most consequential time of redesigning work. And it's creating a lot of fear in people. There's just a lot of uncertainty as it relates to technologies accelerating faster than ever before. Skills are aging faster and becoming obsolete. And people and organizations are starting to feel less and less relevant, or at least fear their relevance long term. And so that was really the premise behind launching this weekly series of the Workforce Futurist, is to talk to top leaders, thought professionals around the world from varying perspectives around this notion of AI, technology, and what makes us uniquely human. We've had Jonathan Westover, who was on and talked about really that individual focus and some of the academic premise behind that. We had Ruth Pierce on, who talked about this technological advancement from the aspect of culture and ethics. And today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Adi Gaskell, who advises the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. He edits AI thought leadership for IMD Business School in Switzerland and is a researcher on the future of work for the University of East Anglia. Previously, he was a futurist for the Sustainability Innovation Group at Caterva and mentored startups through Startup Bootcamp. He is a recognized thought leader on the future of work and has written for Forbes, the BBC, the Financial Times, and the Huffington Post. And I want to mention he has new research that'll be coming out shortly on the gender gap in AI, which I personally am going to be waiting with bated breath to see and to read, and that's through IMD. So we'll be excited to jump into that as well. So welcome. It is so good to have you as this part of the series.
No, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me, Cynthia.
We will, one of the things that I keep thinking about is the things that are keeping people up at night. And I know that you've studied the future of work for years. And so, in your opinion and point of view, what do you think has shifted most?
There's been so much talk and hype around AI since ChatGPT was launched in 22. And I think there's been a bit of a separation from the hype and the actual reality. And if we look back at sort of past technologies, from the personal computer to the internet to mobile and so on, we can see broadly similar patterns emerging that we're seeing now with AI. And that helps to, I think, reassure me at least, that we're not going to be all unemployed. We're not going to destroy the world with this technology. It's a little bit more sobering than that, I think. But yeah, there's been so much hype and so much chatter around it. I think there has been a lot of uncertainty in people's minds about what it can do, what it can't do, what it's set to do. And there's been all the talk about artificial general intelligence and all of this kind of thing. And
Yeah.
we're still a long, long way from that.
What do you think people are underestimating the most? Because you're right. I think I've in previous episodes I've talked about the fear individuals have, the fear leaders have, organizations have, and so a lot of people are either paralyzed by this idea that we're doing nothing because we don't even know where to start, or we're trying to throw
Yeah.
everything the kitchen sink. What do you think we're underestimating?
I mean, that's kind of it, really, because if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, which has been quite accurate for all manner of technologies, I think generative AI is in the trough of disillusionment at the moment. So we had the massive hype where everyone was saying it would be transformational, whether for good or for bad. And now we're realizing it's not really living up to that hype. And so the doom mongers are coming out and saying, well, yeah, it's a rubbish technology that won't achieve anything. And as is often the case, it's somewhere in
Right.
between the two. So
Yeah.
it will be a big thing, but it won't quite be as transformational as perhaps we were promised.
Right.
So I think that's the likelihood for 26. It is a slightly more realistic look at what AI can do and what we need to do as organisations to adapt ourselves both collectively and individually, to better make use of this technology.
That's an important point. I want to start there. When you think about how we adapt ourselves, what are you feeling is the best advice leaders of organizations need to be thinking about doing now? As it's had a bit of a slower, I think, launch than people expected. So time to be a little more prepared and ready than perhaps we thought. What should leaders be doing?
So I think a lot of the AI to date, it's been quite isolated. Often people have been using their own stuff without the knowledge of their managers or the wider organisation. So it's been sort of in the shadows a little bit. It certainly hasn't really been a technology that's been deployed at scale. And I think that sort of underpins the infamous MIT study that like 90% of AI pilots haven't really achieved any return on the investment yet. And I think that's probably why that's been the case. And if we're looking slightly longer term, then it's got to be something, as with all previous technologies, that we're integrating into workflows and adapting the workflows to better make use of the technology. And I think there's a risk, as with any technology, that managers just impose a solution on people, and that never goes down well.
Right.
So it's much better if you're actually co-creating things with employees. But there's been that sort of tendency to get a little bit carried away with, AI automating everyone's work and using it as a cost-cutting tool rather than a productivity tool. And that's probably not a great approach, because it undermines employee buy-in, it undermines employee engagement. And we need people to be working with this technology rather than the technology replacing people. So I think getting that buy-in and co-creating the future with them is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're asking the employee, hey, help us figure out how we can program this technology to do your job. But right. But the reality is, and this is one of the things that Jonathan Westover and I spoke about, is often, not always, but often it's not an entire job, at least not straight away, right? It's an iterative process. It happens over time. It's 10% of your job and 15% of mine. And so to your point, from a change management perspective, it seems that we have this opportunity to say, help us use technology for the things that it can do better and faster and take off your plate, so that you can backfill that 10 or 15 or 20% of the time with higher level, right, better use of your talent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to some Cambridge researchers last week, and they were looking at AI in collaboration, and how we can work collectively with the technology. And if you think about what goes into collaboration or innovation, you're coming up with ideas, you're testing those ideas, getting feedback on the ideas, scaling those ideas up, and there are various sort of tasks that are quite common in whatever we're innovating. And they found that it's not as clear cut as saying, well, humans are better at this, machines are better at this, and that's the clear divide. It tends to be a little bit more organic than that, and you're experimenting essentially with what works best. So it may be that the human comes up with the idea, the machine then gives you feedback on it, or it may be the other way around. And it's a very much longer term process where you're learning about each other essentially, rather than a once and done thing and that there's your output. It's much more organic and long term than that.
I keep saying that, bots and people are going to coexist together as team members, right? That we have to learn how to be part of teaming with technology and having it augment in the best ways rather than completely replacing, which is what you're really talking about. How does from a research perspective, where should individuals show up? So we talked a little bit about leaders need to think about system design. That's the other thing, just to really quickly put a fine point on. It feels like oftentimes the tail wags the dog, as we often say, right? Where we're going to put in this sexy new shiny technology and spend all this money
Yeah.
but we're not thinking about how we redesign the workflows and the humans that still remain in place that have
Yeah.
to work with and alongside and so on.
This was a big thing that came out in the gender and AI research, because it's quite common, regardless of what gender you are, that people are being viewed negatively if they are seen to be using AI. They're viewed as less capable, less creative, sometimes even less trustworthy.
Yeah.
So there needs to be that sort of psychological safety that using this is okay and it's not something you have to do under the desk and away from the eyes of your manager, because you'll get criticized for it. But the key is that women tend to get judged more harshly than men do,
Interesting. I want to
isn't
talk more
great.
about that study, which isn't great, and yet shows up in a lot of different gender related studies.
Yes.
To be honest, right? I want to talk more about what some of the learnings, if it's ready for prime time, around the gender study. But I don't want to lose the a really important point you made around this, not only the psychological safety of using AI, using the technology to advance to make us better, to help do the work that frankly can be generated more quickly,
Yeah.
but at the same time you have to bring your problem solving, your critical thinking, right, your humanness to that equation. And it does feel like the balance, the middle ground is use it, but be authentic about it.
Yeah.
Be transparent, maybe is a better word about it. And don't just copy and paste, because I find that, there's been big LinkedIn debates about this, right? Where it's like
Oh
you can
God, yeah.
tell, yeah, you can tell when somebody replies to a post and it's completely AI generated.
Yeah.
And of course, the
But
judgment if
Deloitte had
there's,
that big thing about sort of doing AI generated work, and their client found out, and that's their reputation
yes,
um,
exactly,
down the toilet.
exactly.
It's not good.
Yeah. So what's the advice around the whole idea of not only transparency? I mean, psychological safety is so critical, but part of it is using it in a way that's ethical, that's
Yeah, and again, it sort of comes back to this whole notion of seeing man and machine as complementary rather than a substitute for one or the other. 'Cause if we think about the pipeline, we may have a degree of experience, therefore we can effectively critique whatever AI is producing, but a more junior person may not have that experience. And it's difficult for them to get that experience if the AI is doing a lot of the stuff that they would ordinarily do. And I think we need to think longer term about the workforce and the collective intelligence, I suppose, between the technology and the humans, to make sure that we're not creating problems for ourselves down the road by really nurturing the development of our younger people.
yeah. One of the things you and I talked about related to that in when we met for the first time was how important critical thinking is. And when you talk about younger people, that's what comes to my mind is generations are going to learn differently. Their need to be able to immediately memorize something and recite something is probably going to be diminishing. And I would say my generation and the generations before me are scratching their head thinking, oh my goodness, we're we're going to hell in a handbasket. But the reality is it's going to require a different level of what makes us uniquely human in terms of
Yeah.
our thought process, right? So how do we focus on, and what are you seeing around this notion of the importance around critical thinking?
It worries me a little bit,
Yeah.
because I think there's obviously coming up with an answer is valuable, but the act of thinking about coming up with the answer and the working out is often even more valuable in terms of deepening your understanding and so on. It feels like we're in an age where we can generate an answer now at the click of a button, and it's instant, and so we shortcut that mental process, and we don't go through the sometimes tedious but often very worthwhile process of learning stuff. And so I worry. I worry if people now will actually bother to read a book, or whether they'll just stick the PDF into ChatGPT or Claude and get a synopsis. I mean, we see with things like languages and that, are people learning languages now, or are they just getting the translator tool in their phone to do it all for them?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, there's the short-term thing, in that we do gain value from the act of learning things.
Yeah.
So for languages, we learn about the culture and the history of a place whilst we're learning how to speak that language. But in the longer term, I do worry whether we're reducing our critical thinking capabilities a bit.
When you made me think about an example, one of the examples I use in my keynote around that which makes us uniquely human and in a world of AI, right, is when I joined my last corporate organization, healthcare organization, 5 months into my role as the leading human resources for this health system. We had a tornado that went across Missouri and destroyed our hospital, one of our hospitals,
Yeah.
in Joplin, Missouri. It was in 2011, and the point around that is technology was wiped out. Cell phones were wiped out. We could not get a hold of anybody. Electricity was out. People didn't have phones because they literally had flown into, miles
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Records were taken out, etc. And the human beings, these caregivers and individuals that served in this health system, had to use their knowledge, their skill, their natural talents, their problem solving to not only do the incredible work of evacuating patients safely and all of these things when they're walking down, staircases in the dark and it's wet
Yeah.
and windy and all of that, but get past the tragedy of that. They're setting up a makeshift hospital. Their individuals were having to show up without reliance on all of the things that we've become so
Yes.
reliant upon.
Yeah.
And so you think about that, and those are examples. I don't think those kinds of situations will disappear from the universe just because we have great technology. I think I share your fear as we become more and more reliant. And so when we can't Google it, when we can't Google the answer.
Yeah. And obviously AI has been trained on our entire corpus from the past. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily know what is to come. And so from
Yeah.
a creativity perspective, we still tend to be a lot more innovative. And there was a good study looking at human versus AI creativity, and AI would often do more safer idea generation, whereas humans would do a little bit more left field stuff. And that's kind of important, isn't it?
Interesting.
And it's the whole Descartes thing. I think, therefore I am. I mean, that's the essence of who we are as human beings. We've gained our position in the world because of our brain and so on.
Yeah.
I don't think we should park that if we can help it.
Yeah. It's going to become more important that academia, parents, organizations, et cetera, continue to create space for not only the creativity, but to your point, building those critical thinking skills, those problem solving skills, that some of that leaning into our intuition,
Yeah.
perhaps, right? That gut instinct that says something about this doesn't feel right.
Yes.
Even if the AI says it's so, is it really so? To your point, it's
Yeah.
replicating the past, not the future.
I mean, driverless cars are probably a great example, because they're trained on so much data, and yet they still struggle when things are a little bit unusual. Would manage that in the drop of a hat. We wouldn't blink an eye at doing that, navigating that environment safely. And I think that's something that we really still have a huge advantage over them.
Let's talk about if, based on whatever's ready for prime time, I know you're doing that research on the gender study with AI. What were some of the other maybe compelling insights that you gained, or maybe some of the surprises that have come out of that so far?
Yes, I mean, we know that adoption is lower for women. And a lot of that is down to fear of judgment and that kind of thing. It's not really about skills, it's not about capabilities. It's a very systemic thing. The workplaces that we're building aren't really encouraging them. There was a nice study that we've included in the paper from Wharton that was looking at generating the skills and doing the training to develop AI related skills. And they found that women aren't doing that anywhere near as often as men are. And whilst we could sort of view that as a classical pipeline thing and say, well, it's women not interested in tech or what have you, that wasn't really the case at all. And it was more, the training often took place outside of traditional office hours. And we still have this unfair balance of domestic caregiving duties and so on tend to fall more on women than men. So if you're asking them to do extracurricular training, then that's harder. And then another big factor was around relocation, in that a lot of the jobs tend to be in Silicon Valley or in Austin and places like that. And again, if you have a child in school, asking them to relocate to San Francisco, it's not always as straightforward as if you were a single person.
Sure.
And it was things like that were undermining women's ability to take up the kind of training that will allow them to get these AI related jobs. It wasn't their skills, it wasn't their confidence, their desire.
Right.
It was more systemic things. I think we need to build that environment that is more female friendly.
Yeah, that is huge, and it resonates, the some of the relational reasons why that's not happening, and that it is interesting. It'd be an interesting thing to unpack, is the notion of the criticism that you mentioned earlier, that there tends to be some criticism around the use of AI, and that women are criticized more harshly than men, which is another concerning phenomenon.
Massively, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think that sort of plays into why a lot of AI usage at the moment is sort of in the shadows and a little bit outside of the managers. Say with Deloitte or other consultancies and things like that, if you are using AI to generate what is essentially a knowledge-based product, the client could think, well, we're being shortchanged a little bit here. We're coming to you because you're the expert. It's not. We're not looking for a commoditized product that we could type into ChatGPT and get the same kind of thing. We're coming to you because you know stuff.
That's right.
And so if you are using AI, then often people want to pay less as well, which helps to commoditize it. So I think certainly knowledge-based organizations need to be a little bit smarter about things and how they're using it. So at the moment it's seen as very much a cost-cutting kind of tool, and from both client and vendor, which I don't think is the best way to look at it. And from a management perspective, I guess you really got to encourage people to move beyond that. Well, this is good enough.
Yes.
We put something into an AI and it generates something that's passable.
Right.
It's a bit lazy.
Yeah.
We're shortcutting our process a little bit. And I guess there's also a risk or a temptation from managers to say, well, AI can produce something really, really quickly. Therefore, your output needs to double, triple,
right,
or more.
Right.
Which again is going to feed into that sort of temptation to take shortcuts and really strip out the human thought that goes into doing things.
I thought Ruth Pierce had a really smart thought about that, which was having guidelines, that organizations should have some guidelines that say, here's where it's okay to use AI, right? And that may be plentiful. And so maybe it's here's where we don't encourage or we restrict the use of AI, right? So be clear about it so that
Yeah.
that builds psychological safety. If I know
Yes.
that, yes, use it, but with guidelines around be transparent. So if you're
Yes.
going to put a proposal together in-house, you're going to put a proposal together and you're going to use AI to do some of the research for you, absolutely fine. Note that you used AI and for what purpose? You know, how much of this document was your own unique work?
Yeah.
And to me that I think that's such a reasonable and smart prompt for leaders because then it says augment, use it, that's what it's there for. It's intended to make us better
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
faster and work at a higher level, so don't discourage it. But if you invite people to use it and then be transparent about it, now you've made it okay rather than I have to
Exactly.
be
Yes.
sneaky about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you are sort of almost itemizing what is AI and what's human generated, then that sort of perhaps puts the client's mind at rest as well. They're not just getting
Yes.
AI slop and paying through the nose for it. They're actually getting the insight that they think they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a client, we were working on a policy together that they wanted to rewrite. And I'm working with their chief legal counsel, and she also oversees HR. And so we had a really good dialogue about what we wanted to see differently in the policy and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And I said, let me do this, full transparency. I'm going to pop this into AI, right? Your old policy with all the
Yeah.
things that we've just discussed that we would want to see differently and see what it returns to us as a starting point, right? That becomes the straw man from which that we can work and edit and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted her to know, like, because I knew I could turn it around really quickly. And I didn't want her to think, man, she's really good. 30 minutes later, she had this entire thing rewritten. I said, here's
Yeah.
what I would do. I think it'll give us a good starting point and save us some time. And it did just that. It wasn't perfect. It required us to lean in. But it did speed along the process for us to be able to use our better thinking and
Yes.
experience. Yeah. Rather than
Yeah.
redlining and retyping.
I mean, it can help us craft better questions and be a little bit more informed in subjects that we don't know much about. I mean, I
Yes.
know a lot of people do turn to AI for things like legal advice and so on like that.
Mm.
And if that's your sole legal advice, then that's probably not a great thing.
Yeah. A little
If it's
concerning.
helping you to take better questions to your solicitor or lawyer, then
Yeah.
that's probably a good use of it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's knowing
Heather,
that balance.
knowing the balance, absolutely. And knowing if you're going to take that advice and act on it, you're ultimately, or your organization is responsible for the outcome of that. Heather
Yeah.
McGowan is going to be on the series in January. She is also a top futurist, keynote speaker around the world. And she spends a lot of time talking about asking better questions. And one of the things we talked about is AI can be helpful she asked the question of where are my blind spots in
Yeah.
this? So
Yeah.
here's my point of view about this or that, or here's what I'm talking about. Where are my blind spots? And I said, that has been so helpful to me because I spend a lot of time speaking to women about issues that are unique based on data and evidence
Yeah.
that have a gender difference, right? Kind of like we were just talking about. And but I am a straight white woman, and
Yeah.
so I have a perspective and I have a lived experience, but I don't know that even though those gender gaps or differences show up, I can speak to how I can relate to those through my lived experience and frame of reference, but I can't speak to it in terms of how other women, of color, et cetera, might
Yeah.
experience those same things. And so, using AI to say, what am I missing? What are my blind spots around this? Has been another really interesting, helpful, provocative way to think about
Yeah.
opening
Yeah.
up my lens, my aperture.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of associate the concept of echo chambers with like Facebook and people going down anti-vax rabbit holes and that kind of thing, but it kind of exists everywhere, really. I mean, we all have our own little echo chambers on LinkedIn and places like that where people like us talk about things in the same way that we kind of talk about them, and we don't
Yes,
think any other point of view exists.
absolutely.
And I know even like when we talk about the future of work and so on, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, the only kind of future of work is for knowledge-based workers, white-collar folk, much like the people talking about the future of work. It's
Yes,
not really about people in factories or healthcare workers or construction people, or they don't really get a voice in the future of work. That's sort of our echo chamber, if you like. That's our blind spot, and yeah,
yeah,
it's good to try and look out of your bubble now and then.
that's right.
I mean, even
Absolutely.
geographically, I mean, it's very easy to think here in London, well, this is the entire epicenter of the world.
Right, right.
And we found out with the Brexit vote I know with like Trump and that in America,
Yeah,
people in California were like, well, how on earth does this happen? Because not everywhere is like California and not everywhere is like London. And there are
right.
people with different perspectives on the world.
Yes,
And for them,
yeah.
their perspectives are completely valid. Um,
We
but we
can
don't talk to
easily
them, we
think
don't
we're
really
the
engage with them, and we
the
think our view is the only one.
the only one. Yes, yes. And certainly the U.S. is guilty, right? Guilty. I want to just take a quick moment to pop over as we're kind of closing in on time here to share something with those who will be watching this back. One of the things that Adi has joined in, I sent a pre-copy of my latest book that's coming out February 3rd is Human Capital Investment Strategy. And I have a couple of questions that I want to reflect back on. But for the person watching this back, if you put in the code LIVE go to my website, put in the code LIVE, use that QR code, you're going to get 20% off the retail price. You're also going to get immediately sent over $728 in free bonus material to hold you over for a few weeks until your book arrives in the mail. And so you're going to get an executive briefing, etc. And I'm personally donating $2 for every book that is sold to Ableite, an amazing organization that helps adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so the reason that I share this now is because we've been talking about this idea of the future of work and human beings and those sort of things. In human capital investment strategy, what I really focus on is this idea of how leaders and organizations can better tend to the portfolio of human beings that choose to show up day in and day out and bring their unique human capital to work. And human capital, unlike financial capital, has a choice. They can
Yeah.
take their I can take my human capital and wherever I wish to. And so I feel as though we're still so reliant on these industrial era practices around how we evaluate performance, how we attempt to predict future performance, what is necessary in terms of filling job descriptions, which I think are, generally fiction, works of fiction. I like to think that job descriptions are these square boxes and human beings are more like puzzle pieces, right? And so we just have to snip off the edges when we try to shove them into these boxes. As you think about the future of work, and you've had the opportunity to see my point of view around investing in humans with the same rigor and intentionality as we invest in our financial portfolios. How do you think that shows up, and what is your advice as it relates to investing in human capital in this future of work?
Yeah, I mean, I often feel when we measure things, and there are a growing number of tools that allow us to measure things in the workplace. But the question is whether they're the right things or whether they're just the things that we can measure. I mean, I talk a lot about, or write a lot about remote work and hybrid work and so on, and it does seem like people advocate for return to office mandates purely because that's something that's easily measurable. They're in the office, therefore they must be doing something worthwhile.
Right.
I mean, it's when you say it out loud, it's so ridiculously simple, and it doesn't really reflect the reality. But that's what can be put into a report and so on. Therefore, it becomes their version of reality. So I think we need to look at people a little bit more holistically. Like you said, we tend to boil people down into a job description shaped box, which doesn't really reflect all of the skills that we bring to the table that don't necessarily fit into that job description. And everyone does stuff at work that wasn't in the job spec.
Right.
We all have talent that wasn't necessarily asked for, but it is valuable nonetheless. So yeah, I think just having an appreciation for messiness and appreciation for a more fuzzy perspective on life and on humanity, because that's kind of what we are. We're not neat and tidy. We're a bit messy and we're a bit creative, and we don't fit into boxes well.
That's right. That's right. I would say, talent is is indiscriminate. Every single human being has talent. It comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds, faith traditions, etc. But because of these filters that we use, years of experience, places people have worked, etc., even forcing where somebody works to some degree with highly portable work, is that we continue to shrink and shrink and shrink the pool, right? Very much everything looks the same. And, if you fish in a pond with only one type of fish, that's all you're going to catch. And so we're missing such an opportunity. And I think as cognitive, so much of the data part of what a lot of people have done can be done through automation. The greater opportunity we have are those natural gifts and talents and the things that are beyond the skill and knowledge, right? That's where we can double down. Yeah.
But I guess it sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that there's that temptation to take shortcuts.
Yes.
It's like the saying, nobody was fired for buying IBM.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, it captures that shortcut that we're not really assessing whether the technology is any good, but it's IBM, so it must be.
Right.
It's a little bit like that. And if we buy in a McKinsey framework or something like that to get the most out of our people, then it must be good because McKinsey did it.
Right.
And we're not doing the effort ourselves to understand who our team are and what makes them tick, and whether they want to work in the office, hybrid work, or what have you. But I think that's the only way you can really do it, is to understand your team, understand what makes them tick, understand what skills they have, how they work together. That's kind of what your job is as a manager.
That's right. That's right. Adi, this has been so incredible. I could go on and on talking to you. This is an area that we both share a great deal of depth of interest in, and you have so much research and continuing to do important research in the space around this whole gender and AI, around the hybrid and sort of work location, other kinds of workforce issues and challenges. Folks can find you on LinkedIn as a place of connecting with you. Any other place that they should reach out to stay in touch and stay connected?
I'm on Twitter as well, or X now.
Yeah.
So I'm on there. I've got a Substack. And I write in various places online as well. So stick me into Google, and I'm sure you'll find me in various places.
That's right. So be sure and connect with Adi Gaskell and continue to follow his research. Again, we hate that we weren't live as planned, but hopefully you've had the opportunity to watch this back and have gained some really great insight and nuggets around the future of work. We will be continuing to host this series in January. We have some incredible guests lined up for the January series, including Heather McGowan, Anita Ledick Victoria Mensch and Lauren Capel, and a couple of others that I'm just waiting to confirm. So we continue to take new and innovative looks at the future of work. Invite you to continue to watch live or watch the playback. And until next time, you've got this.